Hey everyone, this is Alex and Mike with Sage Digital Agency here today for the first time with video turned on. So hopefully you like to look at the both of us. We're here today to talk to you about protecting against WordPress security vulnerabilities. Got a lot of different bullet points we want to go over. And the point being is let's do everything we can in order to safeguard your WordPress website and make sure that things are running as they should be. So Mike, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Excellent. I had the pleasure of seeing you here in Las Vegas just a couple of days ago.
Indeed.
It went too quickly.
That it did.
Back in Miami you are.
Back to the grind.
Back to the grind. So maybe we'll start by talking about, in general, I've seen so often, Mike, that WordPress sites are just simply out of date, right? Whether it's the WordPress version, whether it's the plugins, whether it's the theme files. I mean, it seems to be a plague on many WordPress sites for whatever the case is, poor management, poor oversight, that stuff just seems to be out of date. Am I right?
Yeah, I think because oftentimes a website can survive just being physically on, that often is overlooked. If you were to treat a website the same way that you would treat your car or your house, and you put the proper maintenance into it, whether it's the lawn and watering it regularly and fertilizing it, or putting an oil change and tire tune-ups into your car, you treat your website the same way, you're going to get the same results where it's going to last much longer. I mean, sure, you can drive a car and you don't have to do an oil change for 60,000 miles, but how long is it going to last?
Sure,
making sure that, right, making sure that your plugins are kept up to date, making sure that your PHP version, which is the database, is kept up to date. Depending on what time people are watching this podcast, MariaDB, which is probably the largest database for any sort of cPanel or WordPress hosting, has been set to be sunsetted or end of life. So within the next next few weeks, that database isn't going to be supported, meaning a lot of hackers and bots are going to be looking to exploit sites that are still on that version, because there's vulnerabilities that will be much more easily accessed. And as time goes on, developers are not going to be putting work into adding security patches, so it'll be much more accessible.
Something you mentioned, by the way, this just happened to me with a new client of ours. Something like site was built about 8 years ago. They're having problems, PHP is not loading properly, issues with their current hosting company. And they called us and said, hey, can you please do something? We constantly have issues, things won't work. I log into the site, the last time the theme was updated, you won't believe this, 2014.
I've seen a few of those.
2014, last time the theme is updated. Obviously things aren't working well. I always like to say, look, a website is a concert of many things working together in order to show your live website, right? One thing is out of whack, you're going to really have issues. So it was really rather simple. We migrated the website to our development platform. We updated everything, purchased a new theme, made everything work correctly, and voila, everything is as it should be. But it's surprising to me, again, that, look, there's two things. There's one is not taking care of the maintenance in general, as you've mentioned, right? Like similar to a home, letting the lawn grow, letting things go out, long time without updating. But there's another thing when you're actually paying for quote unquote professional management and it's not being done properly. I mean, what kind of professional management allows a theme, underlying theme for 6 years to go unupdated? It's just shocking.
The themes are probably the least of the concern. It's the outdated plugins that are made by third parties that are much more of a concern, because at least in order for a theme to be accepted by WordPress, it has to, be approved by WordPress. So they're going to have checked it at some point, to make sure it's, sound.
Mm-hmm.
A plugin, anyone can upload their plugin to WordPress, and people can upload the zip file and extract it. And, there's no actual regulation for it.
Yeah, there's a big difference between well-built plugins and plugins that are just random in order to do some one-off functionality. I say that I've said it many times to clients is, hey, there's a big difference, for example, from buying direct from WooCommerce and knowing you're going to get a certain level of plugin development, whereas you can just download some random thing and who knows what kind of damage it will do to the site. So that's a very good point.
Sure. The other part is these random plugins, if they're not maintained and kept up to date with the existing WordPress code base, they might not be compatible and end up breaking.
Yep.
If you're not on top of it, I've seen several times before where customers are not getting their form submissions, and that's due to their form contact plugin not being up to date.
Yep, I've seen that recently. reCAPTCHA changed something with an update of WordPress version, and things went awry for a certain client of ours. Yeah, I saw that. I saw that.
Sure.
So what about access? Let's talk about access. I've seen oftentimes people will be giving out their domain registrar access, their cPanel access rather flippantly, right? Have you seen that?
I have. I think that maintaining a level of control is probably the first step from a development standpoint or as an ownership of a website. Giving out your cPanel is like giving out your social security. You know, there's certain people that should have access, but then most people should not.
Yeah.
You know, outside of your trusted web developer, there's no need for anyone to have it because there's nothing that they're going to get out of it. Now, if someone is updating a blog, you can set permissions within WordPress to give them access only to the blog. They should not have access to be updating themes or plugins or
Absolutely.
adding extra files. And same for, you know, administrators. I think it's a good practice, especially if you're an e-commerce site and you have a lot of employees accessing backend regularly. I think you need to do a quarterly or at least every 6 months an audit to understand who has access and what they're actually doing in the backend. Now there's plugins and ways to monitor the logs to see how many people have accessed and when's the last time someone accessed. If someone hasn't accessed your site in weeks or months, they probably don't need access to it. So it's probably a good practice to remove it.
Yeah.
Now you can also
Agreed.
set, you know, restrictions on how tough of a password is. If someone's using the word password123 or the username admin, that's going to be very easy for a bot to guess, or someone who is trying, you know, maybe a competitor or someone trying to access your back end. So
that's a very good point. Very good point. And maybe we can do on the video portion of this, we can include some links for permission levels and how to assess what is right for the right type of person that needs some form of access to the website. So let's make sure we do that.
Now there's plugins like Scuri and, you know, my personal favorite is WordFence. You can really lock down the back end. For instance, first of all, you can change the actual URL. So most people just use the default, whatever, website.com/WP admin. Anyone who is interested can easily see your code base from the developer tools and understand your sites on WordPress. And they can easily try to access WP admin just to see if that's accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing that, you know, certainly we try to do from a client standpoint, if we redirect the admin page, we can make it where if anyone tries to access WP admin, it'll automatically block them.
Yes.
Because if that's not the default URL for someone to be able to access the back end and someone tries to access it, obviously they don't know where they should be going and they really probably have no business in accessing the back end. You can set, you know, default settings. So let's say you terminate an employee and they try to start accessing the back end. If they put in an invalid username or if they put in an invalid password too many times, we can block that IP. And that means that, you know, they're going to have to go through extra steps to try to get into the back end.
It also, look, WordFence also, of course, has a huge database of blacklisted IPs that any access from that will automatically deny them access to the site, which is wonderful, right? It's a network of, it's the benefit of having it on millions and millions of websites. So that's definitely a big one.
And also you can block people who try to access your site with no refer, which often this is probably a setting that I see most often overlooked, which means if someone just accesses your site out of nowhere, and I'm not talking about going into Google and typing your name and accessing it there, because then the refer is Google. If they just access your website as if it's a bot crawling a site, it'll block it. You know, obviously you can, you know, make sure Google can block your, or, you know, you can make sure Google can crawl your site, but if someone has no refer, then, you know, why do they need to access your site? I've never seen a use case where that would make sense. Interesting.
You made mention too about passwords. I think that's an excellent, there should be a certain level, as you said, it should not be password 1234 is certainly not an acceptable password that should be generated. I personally use LastPass. I love it. I don't know what any of my passwords are. I'm logged in with my devices and they're extremely secure. And we've utilized Teams as well with LastPass, which is excellent for access for people. And again, granting access, and they don't even know what their passwords are. They just have it installed in their browser, which is pretty amazing too. What are your thoughts
Right.
on that?
Making sure that you have secured usernames and passwords, I think, are very important. It'll, you know, put that base level of security just to make sure someone can't get into the back end of your
Mm-hmm.
site. Because if it's guessable, then, you know, even if you have logs and you know where it's coming from, it's not going to do you any good if
Sure.
someone's able to be infiltrated.
Yeah, and you made a great point too. Look, there might have been a reason why someone had access at a certain point, but if a couple of weeks, a couple of months goes by, why do they still need that access? If anything, just change the password so you're notified when someone attempts access again, right? At the worst scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's great. Get rid of it. If it needs it again, just go through the process of granting them access in the future.
I agree.
Got it. Got it. So what about from an analytics perspective, monitoring for bots, issues like that? You made mention of that as well.
Yeah, so you can get a lot of good data from Google Analytics or, you know, Adobe Analytics or Omniture, whatever you're using to monitor your site. Now you can start to see if there's pages that are being crawled. Now this will give you an indication of how much of a risk you are for bots. If you find that there's a bunch of requests to random pages that you don't currently have, either you can put redirects in, or at least you can be aware that a bot's trying to crawl your site, and you might need to add something like New Relic or something, you know, another high level security platform to ensure that your site's secured.
Got it. Got it. Great. Well, look, we went over a bunch of items with respect to vulnerability and how to secure them for WordPress. Is there anything that we've not touched upon?
Yeah, I think one thing that is a easy target are your forms. Often, whether it's a newsletter sign up or a contact form or some PDF download form, oftentimes the forms are just put in and it's asking for a name, maybe a phone number, email address, and you have a submit button. Now, there's two things that you can easily input into most forms, and one is called a honeypot, which is a field that's not visible to the user, but it is visible on the back end. So if someone goes to fill out the form, if I'm a user and I go to fill out a contact form and it's asking for a name, phone number, email address, and I press submit, that's three fields that should come through the server. Now a honeypot adds a fourth one in where it's not visible to me, but a robot isn't going to know that because a robot is not looking at the front end of your site, it's looking at the back end of your site. So it's going to go in and it's going to see 4 form fields and it's going to put a name. It's going to find, you know, be able to read that as a phone number. So it'll input a fake phone number and a fake email address. But what it's not going to do is understand that last field. It's going to think it's a company name or a position. It's going to add some data in. And if you have any sort of upload, it's going to make sure that nothing actually goes into your server. That's the first part because, you know, if it's not visible and there's data in there, obviously it knows it's fake. Now, the other part is CAPTCHA and making sure that you're setting the right permissions on what you're allowing to be uploaded. For almost all cases, there's no actual need to upload anything besides a PDF or a JPEG or some sort of Word doc or Excel CSV. And those are all valid forms, and you can't really insert PHP or any sort of malicious code. Now, if you don't allow those to be blocked, someone can upload into your, let's say you have an upload for a file request or a license. You can upload a malicious script and that's embedded into into any sort of text document, and then that server is, or that code base is going to live on the server. So just making sure that you have the right security permissions on a form field is something that will prevent a lot of sites from being attacked from within.
Yeah. So what's some actionable, someone listening or watching us talk about this subject now, we've made some points, right? So what can they do, right? They're either working with somebody at the moment. Maybe they can ask questions and say, hey, are the following things from a 30,000 foot view being done? If they don't have proper management, maybe they should seek that out. I mean, what are some actionable steps that we can offer to people that are listening right now?
Yeah, so you certainly should either ask someone who knows what they're doing or watch some YouTube videos and figure it out for yourself. But certainly making sure that your plugins and your core files are up to date.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, before you update anything, you need to make sure you have a full backup. You need to make sure your plugins are maintained regularly, which is every couple weeks at most.
At most.
Making sure you're using the current PHP and current database versions that are available depending on the type of server you have. You can audit your users and make sure only the people that need access to your site still have access. I've seen sites that have users that are 3 web development companies ago.
Wow.
So, making sure that's clean, making sure you have some sort of security plugin at the bare minimum on your site,
Mm-hmm.
like WordFence. Keeping an eye on that, making sure the right permissions are set. Now, there's a ton of settings, so don't go crazy unless you know what you're doing. You can check Google Analytics, make sure that you have the proper that you're not seeing random pages showing up that are trying to be found that aren't visible or aren't available,
Mm-hmm.
and making sure that your contact forms are properly secured.
Certainly, certainly. Wow, this is all great info. It's all great info. We'll put some links in the comments of this, and we hope that everybody listening and or watching got some again actionable tips on how to improve the security of their website and get rid of some vulnerabilities that are just frankly unnecessary and to a point that can be easily fixed. So,
Absolutely.
thank you very much for the time, and more in the near future.
Until next time.
Take care.